Imagine walking into a living room where two people are just screaming, like throwing things inches away from a physical brawl.
A total nightmare scenario.
Right, and you are a rookie police officer and your heart is just hammering against your ribs. What is your very first move?
Well, one veteran cop who actually faced this exact scenario decided to he walked over, found the spot on the couch, sat down, and unfolded the morning newspaper.
Which is just wild.
Yeah, I mean, the sound of a page turning in a room that was just vibrating with violence, it completely shattered the momentum of the whole argument.
Oh, I bet.
The couple just stopped screaming and stared in absolute confusion at this officer who was, catching up on the sports section. He didn't draw a weapon or shout orders. He simply introduced this unexpected non-confrontational energy that the escalating conflict, well, it just had no way to process it.
And that story honestly is the perfect entry point into what we are unpacking today. We are doing a deep dive into Verbal Judo, The Gentle Art of Persuasion by George J. Thompson and Jerry B. Jenkins.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
It really is. So we're going to look at the actual mechanics of tactical communication, because the benefits you'll get from understanding this system are highly practical, right?
Right.
We're talking about redirecting negative energy, avoiding unnecessary emotional fallout, and generating voluntary compliance from people who are actively resisting you.
Exactly. Because the overarching mission here is decoding how to use your mind and your mouth to respond to high-pressure situations rather than merely, reacting to them.
Right, because reacting is what gets us in trouble.
Yeah, reacting is biological. It hands all your agency over to the other person's hostility. Responding, though, that is tactical. It keeps you firmly in the driver's seat.
So to grasp the architecture of this whole system, we kind of have to look at the architect himself.
Right.
George J. Thompson's background is highly unusual.
To say the least, yeah.
Right, because he was an English professor teaching Shakespeare, but also a martial arts black belt and eventually a police officer.
And that specific combination is exactly what makes the framework so robust. I mean, literature gave him an understanding of human motivation and rhetoric, right?
Sure.
Then martial arts gave him the physical principles of leverage and redirection. And then policing provided this ultimate high-stakes laboratory to test all those theories on the actual streets.
Talk about a trial by fire.
Oh, totally. And he
Yeah.
realized that the primary reason situations escalate into violence or, in our daily lives, the reason arguments destroy relationships is a phenomenon he actually calls mind-mouth disharmony.
Mind-mouth disharmony, which, when you look at the neurology of a heated argument, makes total sense. We get stressed, our amygdala detects a threat, and we experience this huge cortisol and adrenaline dump.
Yeah, the classic fight-or-flight response.
Exactly. And then the cognitive bypass happens. Our logical brain basically shuts off, and our mouth is suddenly being operated entirely by our lizard brain.
And at that point, we stop communicating to solve a problem. We start communicating to survive, which usually translates to trying to win or to hurt or just dominate the other person.
Right, our words become weapons instead of tools.
Yes, they cease to be tools for building a bridge and become weapons for defending territory. Thompson observed that almost all physical altercations in law enforcement, and honestly, nearly all blown-up professional or personal relationships, begin the exact moment that disharmony takes over.
So the defense mechanism against that amygdala hijack is adopting what the book calls the professional face. And the concept implies that anyone acting in a professional capacity, like a manager, a teacher, a parent, a customer service rep, they must sever their personal ego from their functional role.
Right, but the term face can actually be a little misleading.
How so?
Well, because it sounds like you're just putting on a mask to hide your feelings,
Yeah.
A much more accurate way to look at it is as a fire suit.
Oh, I like that. A fire suit.
Yeah, because the fire suit doesn't stop the heat from existing. It doesn't mean the burning building isn't incredibly dangerous, but it insulates you so you don't catch fire yourself, allowing you to walk into the flames and do the job you're there to do.
So your personal feelings, your pride, your desire to be right, none of those actually put out the fire.
Exactly. They only act as an accelerant.
Wow, yeah. So when someone attacks you verbally, throwing what Thompson calls verbal spears, the natural, uninsulated reaction is to just puff out your chest. We want to take the hit to prove we're tough and then hurl a spear right back.
Which is human nature.
Right. But the fire suit, the professional face, allows you to use a strip phrase. It's the short deflective comment.
And the physics of a strip phrase rely entirely on non-resistance. Think about it. If you put up a rigid wall against a physical force, the wall absorbs all that impact and it might just break.
Right.
But if you simply turn your shoulder, the force rushes right past you.
Hmm.
A strict phrase works the exact same way cognitively.
So, like, if a frustrated client yells something like, you people have no idea what you're doing.
Right, so a rigid response to that would be, actually, we have 20 years of experience. That's a collision.
You're just hitting a wall.
Yeah. But a strip phrase is something like, I hear your frustration, but we still need to review these account details.
So you acknowledge the energy, but you completely refuse to absorb it. You just step off the line of attack. But, I mean, we really should acknowledge the extreme psychological discipline this actually requires.
Absolutely. It's incredibly difficult.
Because when your pride is screaming at you to defend your competence, letting that verbal spear just fly past you without any retaliation feels so unnatural.
It is entirely unnatural, and that is exactly why Thompson frames it as an art and a discipline. You are allowing their negative momentum to carry them off balance, rather than letting it hit your own ego.
Okay, so deflecting the attack is one thing, but avoiding a fight doesn't automatically mean you've solved the actual problem. You still need the other person to actively cooperate with you.
Right, you need that voluntary compliance.
And to get that, Thompson suggests you have to diagnose the psychological profile of the person standing right in front of you.
Yeah, he identifies 3 primary categories of people you will encounter in literally any conflict. The nice, the difficult, and the wimp.
Okay, the nice seem pretty self-explanatory.
They are. The nice are straightforward, they inherently respect boundaries, and they usually cooperate out of a sense of civic or social duty. Honestly, they don't really require tactical communication.
Lucky us. Then you have the wimp. This is the person who nods, smiles, and completely agrees with you in the room, but the second you turn your back, they are actively undermining the directive, gossiping, maybe filing a grievance.
We've all worked with one of those.
Right. They are totally passive-aggressive because they just lack the courage for direct confrontation.
Yeah, and navigating the wimp requires absolute clarity and, honestly, lots of paper trails. But the category where we end up spending like 90% of our tactical energy is the difficult person.
The why guy.
Exactly. Thompson refers to them as the why guy. These are individuals who just instinctively challenge authority. Every single instruction, every request is met with a demand for justification. Like, why should I? Or who says?
Which brings up what the text identifies as the single most powerful word you can deploy in these situations. The word why. Or more specifically, providing the why.
Because the tactical communicator understands that explaining the reason behind a request is not a concession. Not at all.
It feels like one sometimes, though.
It does, but it actually satisfies this profound evolutionary human need for context. We are meaning-making machines. When you explain the why, you bypass the person's ego and speak directly to their rational brain.
And that dramatically increases the probability of voluntary cooperation. But let me push back a little here because I'm sure someone listening is thinking this. If my toddler is throwing a tantrum in the driveway and refusing to put on their shoes, explaining the philosophical necessity of footwear isn't going to get us to preschool on time, right?
No, probably not for a toddler.
Or like if I am managing an employee who constantly pushes boundaries, doesn't explaining myself every single time make it look like I am begging for their permission to lead?
I get that. It feels like surrendering authority because we so often confuse dominance with effectiveness. Dominance is just saying, because I said so.
Right, which never feels good.
No, because dominance creates immediate friction. The other person's ego now has something solid to push against. Think of it structurally. Imposing raw authority builds a wall. Explaining the why builds a bridge.
You're basically removing the friction of the unknown.
Yes, exactly. And the difficult person isn't always trying to overthrow your leadership. In a lot of cases, their brain literally cannot process a directive without the underlying context.
Like a cognitive block.
Precisely. So by supplying the why, you aren't asking for permission. You are demonstrating your competence. You're proving that your request is based on an objective reality, not just your personal whim.
Okay, so if providing context is the ultimate green light for cooperation, we really need to examine the verbal roadblocks that guarantee a total crash. And Thompson dedicates a significant portion of the book to the language of failure, starting with what he calls the greatest speech you'll ever live to regret.
Which is, of course, the speech you deliver when you are fully under the influence of that mind-mouth disharmony we talked about.
It's speaking out of pure, unfiltered anger. You deliver this monologue that feels just incredibly satisfying in the moment. You get to unleash all your grievances and you feel so powerful. But the immediate aftermath is just this landscape of destroyed trust and shattered credibility.
Because anger makes us incredibly articulate, but entirely irrational. When you speak in anger, the real goal of the interaction has secretly shifted.
You're not trying to solve anything anymore.
Nope. You are no longer trying to solve the problem. You are just trying to inflict emotional pain or assert dominance. And human beings have incredibly long memories when it comes to how others make them feel during moments of vulnerability.
So true. To put guardrails on that impulse, Thompson outlines 11 things never to say. And honestly, several of these are deeply ingrained in our daily vocabulary, like the phrase, "come here."
Oh, yeah. Come here is the language of a predator or like a master addressing a subordinate. It triggers an immediate defensive posture in whoever hears it.
Because it demands submission rather than inviting collaboration.
Exactly. Simply changing it to something like, could we speak for a second? Shifts the dynamic entirely.
Another really common one is, "you wouldn't understand."
That one is just a blatant intellectual insult.
Yeah.
You are overtly telling the person they lack the cognitive capacity to grasp reality. Even if the topic is highly technical, dismissing their ability to comprehend it guarantees they will actively work against you, just to prove their worth.
We hear this next one in bureaucratic settings constantly, because those are the rules.
Ugh, the refuge of a lazy communicator. It circles right back to the why guy we talked about earlier. Telling someone it's the rules explicitly communicates that you do not care enough to explain the context, or even worse, that you don't actually know the context yourself. It relies on this arbitrary, faceless authority which human beings universally resent.
But the most dangerous phrase, the one that acts as absolute gasoline on a fire, is telling an upset person to calm down.
Yes, it is the single fastest way to escalate a conflict, period.
It really is.
If we look at the neurology of it, when someone is angry or panicked, they are experiencing a very real physiological event. Their reality is currently shaped by threat. So when you say calm down, you are completely invalidating their emotional state.
It's basically like telling someone who is drowning to just breathe water.
That's a really apt way to visualize it.
Yep.
You're communicating that their internal reality is wrong, that it's inappropriate, and that it's an inconvenience to you.
Which just makes it worse.
Of course. The brain interprets invalidation as a secondary threat. So not only are they dealing with whatever upset them in the first place, they now have to defend their right to be upset against you. The amygdala flares up even hotter.
So if telling them to calm down makes them angrier, what is the mechanical process for actually de-escalating someone who is, screaming in your face?
Well, the book introduces the AAPS framework.
Right, which stands for listen openly, empathize, ask questions, paraphrase, and summarize. But the pivot point of that entire framework is the P, right? Paraphrasing.
Yes, absolutely. Empathy gets talked about a lot as this soft, fuzzy concept, but here it's deployed as a tactical interruption.
Paraphrasing is arguably the most powerful tool in the entire system because it exploits a flaw in how the brain processes language.
Right, because when someone is engaged in an emotional rant, you cannot talk over them with logic, and you certainly cannot order them to stop.
But you can hijack their momentum.
Exactly. By saying something like, let me be sure I heard that right, or let me see if I understand what you're saying.
You just step in as a mirror. But why does that specific phrase force them to actually stop talking?
Because the core drive of an angry person is this desperate need to be understood. So when you offer to echo their words back to them, their brain involuntarily pauses the rant to evaluate your accuracy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you essentially force their prefrontal cortex, the logical, analytical part of the brain, to turn back on. They literally have to listen to you speak their grievance to ensure you got the details right.
It's a forced cognitive reset.
Yes.
Like if you have a coworker venting about a project and you step in with, let me see if I understand, you're saying the timeline was altered without your input and it's compromising the quality of the work.
Exactly.
You aren't agreeing with them, you aren't telling them to calm down. But the act of verifying the information naturally drains all the heat from the room.
And it serves a dual purpose. It cools their neurological state, and it provides you with actual data. Because most of the time, the thing people are yelling about isn't even the actual problem. Paraphrasing ensures you aren't trying to solve the wrong issue.
Now, paraphrasing works wonders if the person's logical brain can eventually be reached, but it assumes a baseline level of rationality.
Right.
What happens when you've done everything right? You have your fire suit on, you've explained the context, you've paraphrased their concerns, and they have completely crossed the threshold into irrational resistance. Like, they are simply not going to comply.
Well, that is the limitation of dialogue. When tactical empathy completely fails, Thompson outlines the five-step hard style. It's a rigid protocol designed for the ultimate why guy who just refuses to cooperate.
Let's run this through a real-world scenario so we can see how it works. Imagine you're a manager, and an employee is outright refusing to comply with a new mandatory safety protocol on the floor. Standard conversation has completely failed. What is step one?
Step one is ask. You just make a direct ethical appeal. I need you to just put the safety gear on so we can continue the shift.
Okay, straightforward.
Then step two is set context. You explain the why one final time, removing any ambiguity whatsoever. The policy was updated because we've had 3 near-miss incidents this month, and my job is to ensure everyone goes home uninjured.
Step three is present options, which honestly feels a little counterintuitive when you are giving an order.
It feels that way, but it's crucial. You do not make a threat, you outline reality. A threat is, do this or you're fired. Presenting options is, if you wear the gear, we can get back to work and finish the production run. If you choose not to wear the gear, I will have to suspend you for the day pending a safety review.
So you give them the agency to choose their consequence.
Exactly. You're putting the steering wheel in their hands.
Interesting.
Step 4 is confirm. This is the final failsafe. You ask directly, is there anything I can say to earn your cooperation at this point?
Is there anything I can say? Man, that is a heavy line to draw. If they say no, the burden of what happens next falls entirely on them.
They have totally authored their own outcome, which leads to step 5, act. If they still refuse, you execute the professional consequence you just outlined.
You send them home.
You send them home, you call security, you walk away, you take action without anger because you know you exhausted every possible verbal avenue.
So stepping back from the specific tactics for a second, the book crystallizes this entire philosophy into the 3 great communication arts: representation, translation, and mediation.
Right.
Representation is maintaining that fire suit, acting as the professional representative of your role, not your ego. But translation is where the real insight happens, I think.
For sure. Translation is the ability to decode the actual meaning buried beneath someone's hostile or clumsy delivery. It's looking past the verbal spear to see the vulnerability that's actually holding it.
Think about the classic passive-aggressive workplace email. We've all gotten them. A coworker replies to a chain with, as I explicitly stated in my previous email.
Oh yeah, the literal translation of that is, you're an idiot who can't read.
Exactly. And our instinct is to just fire back. But the tactical translation, the real insight here, is recognizing that this coworker is likely feeling undervalued, overwhelmed, and just desperate for someone to acknowledge the effort they put into that prior message.
And once you translate the hostility into a core need, you can deploy the third art, mediation. You use your calm presence and your paraphrasing tools to address the underlying need, like saying, it looks like you put a lot of work into that initial brief. Let's make sure we integrate those points.
Rather than attacking the hostile tone.
Exactly. You address the need, not the attitude.
This all rests on a foundation that Thompson calls the 5 universal truths of human interaction. And they are surprisingly elegant. Truth 1, everyone wants to be treated with dignity and respect. Truth 2, all people want to be asked rather than told. Truth 3, all people want to know why. Truth 4, all people want to be given options rather than threats.
And truth 5, all people want a second chance when they make a mistake. If you reverse engineer every conflict you've ever had, you will find that one of those 5 truths was violated.
Wow, yeah.
Either someone felt disrespected, cornered by a threat, or just kept in the dark about the why.
This has been such a dense tactical deep dive. We've moved from the biology of mind-mouth disharmony to the mechanics of the strip phrase, the power of paraphrasing, and the rigid structure of the hardstyle protocol. Now, the challenge for you listening is to actually take these tools out of the abstract and apply them today.
Because theory without practice is just trivia. You really have to test the mechanics out in the real world.
So here is your assignment. Look for an opportunity to use that paraphrase interruption. When a colleague or partner is venting, step in gently with, "Let me see if I understand what you're saying," and just observe how it shifts their cognitive state.
It's like magic.
Or, at the very least, catch yourself the next time you feel the urge to tell an agitated person to calm down and recognize that you are about to pour gasoline on a fire.
Modifying your language alters the entire architecture of your relationships. It's really about building bridges instead of walls.
Before we wrap up, a quick request for you. If you found value in this breakdown and want to help others discover these conflict resolution tools, please subscribe and like the video or audio, depending on the platform you're listening on right now.
It really does help.
It directly helps the algorithm show this deep dive to more people, allowing you to essentially pass the knowledge forward. We deeply appreciate you spending your time learning with us.
And as we close, I want to leave you with one final thought regarding those universal truths we just mentioned. If it is a fundamental reality that all people deeply desire a second chance when they make a mistake, well, it's worth asking ourselves how often we actively grant that grace to others.
That's a great
When
point.
someone lets their lizard brain take over and uses their words as weapons against us, do we offer them a path back to dignity? Or do we deny them the very second chance we so desperately demand for ourselves when we are the ones who lose control?
We want the safety net, but we rarely want to hold it for anyone else. Avoiding the verbal spear is just the first step. Making sure we aren't throwing them ourselves is the true mastery. Keep that in mind the next time the temperature rises. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.